What's going on, everyone? I've got the first part of this done. So there's 4 parts to this filing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down one part at a time. That way it's not like an hour-long video. And hopefully you have a better understanding this way. So let's go ahead and take a look at SR NSCC 2021-013. So the purpose of this, I already went over this briefly in the last video. If you'd like to pause it and read it verbatim, you can. I'll just go ahead and go over the 4 things they're going to be doing. So in this video, we'll be going over the passive acknowledgement process, whereby any settling bank that does not timely acknowledge that it will settle its settlement balance with NSCC, or refuse to settle for one or more NSCC members, or AIP, which stands for Alternative Investment Product, non-member funds, for which it is the designated NSCC settling bank, and has not otherwise been in contact with NSCC, would be deemed to have acknowledged its settlement balances. That's the one we're going to be looking at in this video. The other 3 we'll be covering is, in the next one, we'll look at amending the definition of AIP settling bank. In the third one, we'll look at codify certain settlement processes. And number 4, make certain technical, clarifying, and conforming changes. So while it all may not make sense after this one, at the end of all 4 of these, it should paint a clear picture of what they're trying to do. And anytime it's involving settlement, that's huge because that's one of the biggest issues we have in the market. So let's continue. So today, a failure of an NSCC settling bank to timely respond to the settlement agent by the settlement acknowledgement deadline could create uncertainty with respect to timely completion of settlement at NSCC. This is because today, NSCC is not permitted under the rules and its settlement procedures to submit the NSS file through the settlement agent unless all the NSCC settling banks in the file that are required to acknowledge have acknowledged. NSCC must therefore determine whether it should remove the settlement balance of the unresponsive NSCC settling bank from the NSS file in order to allow the processing of the rest of the NSS file for the other NSCC settling banks that are part of the NSS file. If NSCC does not remove the settlement balance of the unresponsive banks from the NSS file, then the NSS file cannot be created and settlement cannot be completed for the other NSCC settling banks. So you see a lot of these people are running into settlement issues, and it's not even their own fault, because before, the settlement balance of the unresponsive settling banks was still on the NSS file, which was preventing it from being created and settlement to be completed. As such, today, the NSCC may need to remove the settlement balance of the unresponsive NSCC settling bank from the NSS file in order to submit the NSS file and complete settlement for the other NSCC settling banks that are part of the NSS file. Oh man, they're getting ready for some settlement, thus potentially delaying settlement of the NSS file. Such potential delay would arise from the time needed to remove the figure of the unresponsive NSCC settling bank and then reestablish the NSS file. Moreover, with respect to the NSCC members or AIP non-member funds who are using the particular NSCC settling bank, I like how they're not naming which bank this is. NSCC would need to settle individually with those NSCC members or AIP non-member funds via the Fedwire Funds service. Okay. Anyways, which also presents the possibility of a delay because of the time it may take to complete this process individually with each affected NSCC member. So let me get this straight. They're preparing for mass settlement. They're creating excuses why they can't do it all at once, and they're may have to do it individually using Fedwire. It smells like chicken in here. Let's continue on. No. You do the morph. I did the morph. You do the morph. Good job. Okay, so did I skip one? Okay. Sorry, you gotta get the morph on here, right? And it's not even working. Anywho, NSCC is proposing to implement a passive acknowledgement process for end-of-day settlement and AIP, alternative investment product settlement, and alternative investment product settlement that to address the situation discussed above that we just talked about, where an NSCC settling bank is unresponsive and cannot be reached. This would allow NSCC to submit the NSS file through the settlement agent for NSS processing more promptly, and thereby allow settlement to be completed for the other NSCC settling banks that are part of the file. So until 2016, DTC's rules also required settling banks that settled on behalf of DTC participants for DTC settlement to affirmatively acknowledge or refuse to settle. So that's the problem, right? They're not acknowledging anything, and thereby, just because they're not acknowledging it, they've been able to delay settlement. So this is changing that. Now, In 2016, the DTC amended the settlement service guide to provide for a passive acknowledgement process such that a settling bank which does not timely affirmatively acknowledge its settlement balance or refuse to settle would be deemed to have acknowledged its settlement balance. So that's the trick, right? This is why they're creating a passive acknowledgement system. Because if they ignore it, it's going to be considered acknowledged. There you go. Get effed. Now in 2020, the Fixed Income Clearing Corporation did a similar filing as well. Thereby, the passive acknowledgement process being proposed by NSCC is the same process that DTC and FICC have put in place. So it's interesting to me that those two have it in place. And what's the biggest issue that we have with settlement? The NSCC. So maybe this is the answer. Don't know. No one's enforcing the rules. I get it. I get it. Now, this is the NSCC passive acknowledgement process. The NSCC proposes to introduce a settling bank passive acknowledgement process in the rules for settling banks and for AIP settling banks to manage the collection or payment of settlement amounts in the event that any settling bank or AIP settling bank does not timely provide an affirmative acknowledgement or refusal with respect to its settlement payment amounts by the settlement acknowledgement deadline. If a settling bank or an AIP settling bank does not acknowledge or refuse its settlement amount by the settlement acknowledgement deadline, and NSCC is unable to establish contact with the settling bank or AIP settling bank, NSCC proposes to deem the settling bank's or AIP settling bank's final settlement balance as acknowledged. That's insane. Now, through this proposed passive acknowledgement process, NSCC will assume that the settling bank's or AIP settling bank that has failed to acknowledge its figures or refused to settle by the settlement acknowledgement deadline intends to settle for its respective NSCC members or AIP non-member funds. Holy shit. The settling bank or AIP settling bank's final debit settlement balance or final credit settlement balance would then be debited from or credited to its account at the Federal Reserve Bank through the NSS process. Now, the proposed change to introduce passive acknowledgement process for NSCC settling banks continued. Now, this is what they're going to do. They're proposing to establish an acknowledgement cutoff time for end-of-day settlement and AIP acknowledgement cutoff time for AIP settlement, after which NSCC would apply the passive acknowledgement process if it is unable to reach an NSCC settling bank. So if they can't reach them and the deadline has passed for the cutoff of settlement, guess what? You're going to be acknowledged and you're going to be settling. Now, since EOD settlement is centralized with DTC settlement, the acknowledgement cutoff time will be the acknowledgement cutoff time established in the Settlement Service Guide for DTC settlement. I believe the cutoff time is 3:30 p.m. Eastern or 4:30 p.m. 4:30 p.m. Eastern or 3:30 p.m. Central my time. Now, the AIP acknowledgement cutoff time would be defined in Rule 1 with respect to each AIP settling bank regarding AIP settlement of AIP debit balances and AIP credit balances as the latter of 30 minutes after the AIP settling bank has been notified of its AIP debit balance or AIP credit balance, or the new AIP debit balance or the new AIP credit balance, if readjusted as set forth herein, as applicable. And number 2, 30 minutes prior to the settlement deadline established by the NSCC. NSCC would add a statement that it would post the settlement deadlines for AIP settlement on the NSCC website, which it currently does. Now, if an NSCC settling bank does not submit either 1, an acknowledgement that it will settle the settlement balance with NSCC, or 2, a refusal to pay the settlement balance by the acknowledgement cutoff time or the AIP acknowledgement cutoff time as applicable, and not has been in contact with the settlement agent, then the settlement agent would attempt to contact the NSCC settling bank. If the settlement agent is able to contact the NSCC bank and it notifies the settlement agent that the settling bank cannot at this time submit its acknowledgement or refusal to pay its settlement balance and that it needs more time, then the NSCC settling bank would not be deemed to have acknowledged that it will settle such settlement balance with NSCC. So, great. They can still say, I need more time. And it looks like they get out of it. Now, however, if the NSCC settling bank cannot be reached, then the NSCC settling bank would be deemed to have acknowledged that it will settle such settlement balance with the NSCC. Okay, so basically what they're saying here, if they notice that there hasn't been any acknowledgement, they're going to try to contact the bank that hasn't acknowledged. If they can't get a hold of them, they're going to be acknowledged. If they can get a hold of them and they answer and they say, we need more time, then they will not be acknowledged. Holy shit. Hopefully they don't answer the phone. Maybe this is like a reverse margin call. Like this margin call, whenever you get called, if they don't answer this one, you're fucked. Maybe this is how they get them to answer the phone. You can only hope, right? No, we did the morph and I messed it up. Okay, so no, we already went that. We already did that. So, The passive acknowledgement process described herein would also apply in situations where an NSCC settling bank is provided with a new settlement balance after such NSCC settling bank's refusal to pay the settlement balance for one or more NSCC members or AIP non-member funds. NSCC would also revise the rules to state that each NSCC settling bank must ensure that it maintains accurate contact details with the settlement agent so that the settlement agent may contact the NSCC settling bank regarding the settlement process and any settlement issues. Uh-oh. Coming down the pipe with settlement issues. You know what that means. Money. Okay, so proposed changes to Rule 1 and Rule 55 and Procedure 8. Now, whenever there's changes to a rule or a process, there's changes to the rules, the underlying rules, because of this process. Now, they're proposing to add a new subsection C in Section 9 of Rule 55 and in Section D1 of Procedure 8 to provide that if the NSCC settling bank does not acknowledge its settlement balance or notify the settlement agent that it refuses to settle, then at the AIP acknowledgement cutoff time or acknowledgement cutoff time as applicable, the NSCC settling bank is deemed to have acknowledged the settlement balance. Okay, so basically this is just going over what we just went over before. It's basically re-going over this, but in the form of a rule. So we can skip over that, save you some time. It's basically reiterating what we just read. And then they're also going to be adding a new subsection G of Section 9 in Rule 55 and a new subsection G of Section D1 of Procedure 8. Which, okay, this is the same thing again. It's just saying that they got to use the most recent contact information. They got to have up-to-date and accurate contact details. And they're also going to be deleting language in Section D1 that states if the NSCC has not received funds from the settling bank with a net debit and the settling bank has not sent refusal messages and or an acknowledgement message, NSCC begins failure to settle procedures in respect to the settling bank at this time. So they're going to be removing that. So they will not be beginning failure to settle procedures. Oh, shit, dude. Failure to settle. FTDs, Dad. FTDs. They're proposing to delete this language to reflect the new passive acknowledgement process. Yippee-yay. Now, in essence, what is this one doing? It's involving settlement. Always a huge deal, right? Now, there will be a passive acknowledgement system. That's what they're talking about. The FICC has one. The DTC has one. Basically, if these mofos keep ignoring requests to settle and don't acknowledge it, they're going to be acknowledging it. Now, there is an exception, of course, that we just saw, and that is if they do get a hold of them, and they do answer when they're trying to be contacted for a settlement issue, and they do say they need more time, I guess they're off the hook. So maybe it's reverse psychology to get them to answer the phone. They won't know if it's margin call or, relief call. So I don't know. Go get them, NSCC. The NSCC's been the problem all year. We need some kind of settlement from the NSCC. That's the main issue. So this could be a big one. I'll get the other ones out for you. And the next one will be to look at part 2 of this, which is amend the definition of AIP settling bank to correspond with the definition of settling bank and remove AIP settling bank only member as membership category. So we should be able to find out if there's any loopholes in the next few sections. So anyways, holy shit, that was a mouthful. This was a huge one, I'm telling you. I know no one's enforcing the rules, but hey, settlement's the issue.